we're talking about really educated people, smart people. How are they being trafficked?
Yeah, this is what makes this so difficult and so new. When you're an educated person and you have a career, you don't think that applying for a job within your industry that furthers your career would ever get you tied up in a human trafficking syndicate.
You have a PhD. You speak perfect English.
You think you're safe from traffickers. You're wrong.
This is Judah Tana,
Founder and International Director of Global Advance Projects, and a committed advocate for the prevention of human trafficking in the ASEAN region,
here to reveal the shocking new face of human trafficking.
and why educated Ethiopians are prime targets.
How do the scams actually happen?
The way that it's set up is you have these purpose-built cities, high-rise buildings, hundreds of them, all within a walled compound that are controlled by militia military, and for about 18 hours a day, they are there to sit on a computer and to use telephones and find vulnerable persons in the West that they can convince to make investments into illegitimate industry.
Should we be really concerned?
This industry, this transnational organized crime for forced criminality, these scam centers, has now become more profitable than any illegal trade in the world. Yes, we should all be concerned.
A person working 18 hours a day, being tortured, having no freedom, and wanting to go back to that life.
I can't judge until I walk in their shoes, but if you're sitting at home and your maximum you're going to earn is $50 a month, and you can go back to a scam center and you can earn $800 to $1,000 a month, which do you choose?
Do we know the masterminds? Judah Tana, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk to you about the issue that we are going to discuss about human trafficking. I don't usually bring people from that background but to talk about human trafficking because it's not a big issue for Ethiopians. Oh, to be general a bit for Africans as well. Why should I talk to you?
Well, first off, yeah, thank you for having me
right.
on your podcast, on the show. I like that you say it's not a big issue for Ethiopia or other Africans. Mm-hmm. I think that is where we should start because this is a huge crisis. Mm-hmm. This is a major issue. Mm-hmm. Why I came to Ethiopia is because in the last few years, we've returned over 2,000 Ethiopians back to their home country after being trafficked into Southeast Asia, specifically into Myanmar and what's known as the scam centers. So there is a great number of people that are being trafficked in person for forced criminality into other parts of the world. And so we came here to greet and see those survivors that we returned and to learn more about where they came from, because we have a large number still to rescue, still to return to their home country. And we need to understand what some of the factors are around why they left and how difficult it is once they return.
Oh, okay. I was watching some videos and reading about your work, and my understanding was human trafficking. People are going to other places, seeking for opportunities and getting jobs and things like that. But we're talking about really educated people, smart people. How are they being trafficked?
Yeah, this is what makes this so difficult and so new and outside of what our normal understanding of trafficking is. Like you say, most trafficking would have happened to the lower socioeconomic community, would have happened to those who are more vulnerable, those without employment, and those seeking, to survive. They become a vulnerable community that are then trafficked to foreign nations and exploited while they're there. This unique form of trafficking required educated people to run the scams in the center. And so the transnational organized crime community focused on the educated, those with PhDs, master's degrees, bachelors, in order that they could utilize their expertise in language, their expertise in computers, their expertise in psychology, and their understanding of the global world, because they needed people that could quickly think on their feet while working in these scam centers, convincing the victim on the other end of the computer or telephone that they actually come from the area of America that they're talking from. And so you have to have educated people that have had some sort of, understanding, some kind of education in the Western world, so they can think like a Western person. So the majority of people that we've seen and we've supported are actually so different than what the norm would be on trafficking persons. And that makes this really unique and quite complicated because it's so new. People have never heard about it, which means when you're an educated person and you have a career, you don't think that applying for a job within your industry that furthers your career would ever get you tied up in a human trafficking syndicate. But in these circumstances, it does.
How do the scams actually happen?
So the way that it's set up is you have these cities built. They are purpose-built cities. We are talking about high-rise buildings, hundreds of them, all within a walled compound that are controlled by militia military, by armed guards. These people are forced to enter offices that have hundreds of computers, if not thousands, within these buildings. Each floor is filled with 150 computers. There'd be 10 floors. They are forced to go in, and for about 18 hours a day, they are there to sit on a computer and to use telephones and find vulnerable persons in the West that they can convince to make investments into illegitimate industry. So that's investment into industries that is made to look like legitimate forms of investment, legitimate forms of crypto trading, forex trading, but actually it's all designed by this criminal enterprise to trick you into losing your life savings. And the way in which it operates is so precise and it is so good that we're seeing an exponential growth of loss of money. We are now estimating more than $3 trillion being lost a year in this organized crime, this financial fraud crimes, internet, online crimes industry.
You're telling me that Western countries are targeted, and people, especially speaking English-speaking individuals, are targeted. My understanding is, if you target people from this part of the world, from the Western countries, you must be investing a lot. So what are those countries doing? I mean, these are rich countries we are talking about. We are talking about the US, Europe, where you're from, Australia, and countries like that. What are they doing about it?
So if I can talk about the scam side of things, when an individual ends up at a retirement age, our countries are set to, for a lot of people, to choose self-managed funds. And so they have their assets sitting there ready to invest and diversify. The scam comes along, the individual comes along and convinces them to spend a very small amount of money, maybe starting at $5,000, into this investment. They then return money week in and week out on that investment to convince them that the investment is genuine. They then put another lot of money, maybe another $10,000. And again, every week you start to see that investment return into your bank account and you're amazed. Because it seems legitimate. Why is this company giving me back the money? It's the long game. So the industry itself is set up that they are fine to start returning you the income that you think you're going to be generated. Because when you learn that your investment is turning over 25%, you understand that it is far greater than any investment you have. And you start to liquidate all your assets. And they convince you, you can take this next investment, but I'm sorry, it's a minimum 100,000 buy-in. But it's guaranteed just like the 10,000 you put in, but this one is a step up. So we don't allow less than 100,000. Are you okay with that? And you've got this managed fund that's making 3%, 5% a year, 10% a year, and you've now quadrupled that. with this small investment, and you're thinking, this is how I'm going to retire well. They take that money, they invest it into the scam, and suddenly it just disappears. You can't log on to your portals anymore. The person that was talking to you on the phone no longer answers calls. Everything is deleted. You completely disappear off the chart and your money is gone. You ask the question, what are they doing about it? I mean, at this moment, trafficked in person for the forced criminality, the scam centers, is so new. It's only about 4 years old.
Wow.
In the industrial size. I mean, we've known scamming for years, right? Most people would liken it to the Nigerian prince scam. If you let me deposit $5 million into your account, I'll give you a percentage of it. Or if you give me $10,000, it will release this huge fund and I'm going to help you. And you think that's wild and crazy. I'd never get fooled into that. We've had different types of scams along the way, but nothing that has become industrialized like this. We are talking about a machine that is now producing a 24/7, a non-stop machine that never ends, that is out there looking for the vulnerable. What's the world doing? We're playing catch up. What's the Western world doing? Trying to collect as much data to try to understand the process that they possibly can from these compounds that are completely locked off. Anyone that leaves, phones are deleted, computers are cancelled. Like, you don't walk out of the compound with any intel from inside the compound. They make sure of that. And therefore, it's very hard to learn what is going on inside. And so the world is playing catch up while these industries are running miles ahead.
Do we know the masterminds?
The
Masterminds, the ones up doing the whole thing?
Yeah, so this is known as the Chinese transnational crime syndicate. It's obviously, you never really know who's at the top.
Yeah.
Even when they think they've got the kingpin, he's not usually the guy that actually signs the checks.
Because the reason I'm asking you this question is I watched a documentary that the kingpin is called and he's now in prison or something like that. So anyone would assume that after having him in custody or in prison, taking him away from the scene, you wouldn't think that something would occur again, but still.
I think these people, what you're referring to is probably Shi Zhang that was instrumental in the development of Yatai in Myanmar.
Yeah.
There's also been the kingpin in Cambodia that's been arrested and is in for extradition. And then there's Alice, who was in the Philippines, and she's also been arrested. I would still say that these are management level bosses. And so, yeah, they were instrumental. They developed the regions. They brought in industry. They were the face. But of course, the grandfather of the whole thing is still sitting comfortably in his office or in his library at home. The face is never known. And so we've looked at it and we've said, there's been Broken Tooth that's also been a guy that's been known from China that developed that region from the China-Myanmar border. And again, it's they themselves are millionaires, if not billionaires, from the scamming system. And they helped make sure that it developed and grew, but somebody sent them on that mission. And if you hear Shi Zhang, he often talks about that. And in the documentary that I think that you would have listened to, it went into kind of that idea that he is really a plant from the Chinese government that came down, or Chinese big business that came down. And so it is still the efforts of those who are in kind of the investigation globally, really trying to track down who is responsible for this. But at the moment, they're just finding mid-level bosses and those who might have managed to get millions of dollars, but not really being the ones behind the entire thing.
Why are you interested in this?
I didn't focus. I mean, it wasn't on my horizon. I didn't think about it. I just happened to be at the right place at the right time. I mean, I grew up in this region of Thailand and Myanmar. I moved there when I was 14 with my mother. And so I went to high school, kind of in the region, and I decided in my adult life I would go back after my studies, and I would dedicate my life to what's happening with the civil war in Myanmar and the refugee crisis and lack of education and lack of medical care in that area. And that was really a focal point of what I had. From there, the area in which I live, I mean, we're talking just a few kilometers from my house, we watched rice fields and cornfields just be cleared, and these mountain of buildings, these concrete jungle rise from the ground within a very short amount of time. It all happened within COVID. And so we heard about investments prior to COVID, but nothing took place till COVID hit. And under that cover of darkness, these companies moved in thousands of workers, about 40,000 workers estimated, and they built this overnight. I watched this grow and I thought to myself, wow, I'm on two parts. I love business. My family's always been in business. I looked and I thought, bringing in business and trade and infrastructure into this region would be a good thing because there was no employment for anyone. And I watched this kind of explode and I thought, you know, what is this? But then I got contacted by an African, by a Kenyan who was inside the scam center. It's the first time anyone had ever heard of these people being trapped. I mean, it was so new. Nobody in my town knew, no expats knew, no nationals knew. I mean, I couldn't find anyone that could answer a question. Yet she reached out online and convinced me that her case might be genuine. She said, I'm trapped, I can't get out. And so I asked her to give me all the details of herself, thinking that she'd run away, thinking that it was a trap, thinking that it was a scam myself. I thought there's no chance that this is real, right? She gave me her name, her number, parents' names, addresses, every detail that she possibly could. And I contacted the embassy official. I contacted their embassy in Thailand. And I said, I think I've been contacted by someone in human trafficking. And the ambassador called me 9 a.m. the next morning. He said, this is real. He said, whatever you can do to get my people out, please do it. And so because of being in this region and having worked for so long, I was able to make a phone call, and that phone call resulted in 7 Kenyans being rescued from the scam center. And that was day one of ever understanding what is taking place. Talk to them. My number then went to other embassies that had people trapped. It then went to people, other victims inside the scam centers. And suddenly I'm getting phone calls and messages from everywhere asking to be rescued. And as that became over time, I mean, it just one thing led to another. And 4 years later, it's my full-time life is really just being there to, I guess, do my part in the greater picture of seeing people rescued, recovered, and returned home to their country and to their families.
Do you think Africa or Ethiopia in particular should be worried about the whole thing the same way like the Western world? Because the extent of the crime that is happening is not the same, I believe.
Yeah, I've heard it say from other countries, we're not that involved because this doesn't affect us. That is a very naive concept, because what we have seen now is this is a global issue. It deserves a global response. There is no corner of this globe that is free. I mean, 72 countries is represented in these scam centers, maybe even more. That means there are trafficking victims from almost every corner of this globe. The only place that they're not victims of trafficking is because they are the ones that the scam centers are focused on victimizing. So we don't see Americans in the scam centers, but that's because we're focused on the victims in America, getting them, I mean, they're the focus of the scam centers. So what we're seeing, even with the returned people, I mean, it's in two ways. They're growing at an unbelievable rate. There is news going on saying that certain scam centers are being closed down, that there's crackdowns from governments. Well, what we're knowing is, like, for KK Park, the notorious KK Park, which was the beginning of this entire journey in Myanmar, that was shut down and destroyed. Prior to that, they built 400 new buildings just south of that, so they could move the 3/4 of the people from KK Park into the new centers, and only 1/4 were rescued, quote unquote, and allowed to go home. That appeased the globe, saying there's a crackdown. But the crackdown wasn't genuine. The crackdown was an organized, orchestrated event that made governments look good on their policies. But what we saw is that there is a large number of people that are still trapped in compounds. And their story, their journey has not ended yet. Going back to your question on should Ethiopia be worried? Yeah, you've got a country that wants their people to go abroad for work, and that's not essentially a bad system. Yet if there's not protocols in place, not checks and balances that protect the individual when they go out, not a legitimate legal process in which the majority can access to find real jobs abroad, then we're seeing people apply for jobs that are illegitimate. And then they get trapped in these scamming programs or in this human trafficking. Then they're trained, and we have young men and women returning with all the knowledge they need to continue committing these crimes. And yet they come with no support, no psychosocial welfare, no one there to listen to their story, no one to understand them, no one them to welcome them back to their home country. They essentially are put on a flight from Thailand or whichever country they're returning from, and they return home and there is nobody there to greet them at the airport. They return home and the things that were here in the first place that pushed them out, no employment, no food, coming from rural areas, no money, educated, but yet I can't find a job. The scamming system, the scamming bosses are still there beside them, still messaging them every day. You can come back. You can continue working. Now what we're seeing is there's hubs being built all over Africa, and it being run by the Africans that have returned from the scam centers. And so this becomes a national crisis. It becomes a national security risk for your home country, for any home country. We just finished visiting Kenya, Uganda, and now Ethiopia. And it is not surprising, but it is very disheartening to learn that each one of the countries have known scam centers now operating from returned persons to their home country. And they're not always focused on America any longer. If there is cryptocurrency in your country, they can then focus on you.
It's really amazing. I mean, I never thought that something I hear from documentaries or TV shows, maybe as just a show, a movie would happen like that in a country like Ethiopia. Did you happen to meet any of these people? I mean, given that these people are educated people who understands the world, who have these big qualifications, do you have any kind of take about them in the future or involving in this kind of thing?
If I understand the question correctly, I mean, we're frontline workers. So we are the ones that actually receive them. We're the first people that embrace them once they get out of these scam centers. We then continue to support through their journey until they return home. And many of them we keep in contact after they've returned home. And like I said, you get time to talk to them. We often spend days with them, if not weeks sometimes, in the rescue centers and through the processes in which they take in order to get home. There can be between hours and days and weeks that we get to spend with these people. And we get to talk to them. We get to really understand their lives, hear their stories, understand their desperation, understanding that, I mean, to hear from a young man that was educated, that went to university, that had a career, that had a wife, children, that had a home, and he went for what he thought was a better life, and he got trapped in these scam centers and didn't get a wage, didn't get a pay, didn't get anything. And so there was no support heading back to his family. The only way out was for him to pay a $10,000 ransom. And he was so frightened to call home. But eventually it got bad enough that he finally picks up that phone and he says to his wife, I need you to sell our home. I need you to move out. I need you to take yourself and our two kids, and I need you to become homeless because I've got myself trapped in this situation that I can't get out of and I'm going to die. And you are calling your wife and you're forcing her to become homeless. And you're giving up a home and land, probably not what you purchased, but what was generationally handed down. Something that your grandfather gave you thinking this is for your grandchildren. And this is the inheritance that you're expecting, generational inheritance of land, of cultivated areas, of your grandfather who grew banana plantations or who raised cattle. And you call your wife and you say, sell it all. I need $10,000 to buy my freedom. She does so, buys that man's freedom. brings her husband home. They are now living on the streets homeless. But not only that, he has to apply for a job, and in his CV there is a year missing. It's a year that he was in a scam center. You try to convince your boss that you are innocent, that you're not a criminal, that you're actually a good worker, but you cannot explain a year of your life. That is where many of them are finding themselves. And I talked to an NGO. I mean, there's light sometimes at the end of the tunnel. I talked to an NGO today that works here, NIGAT. They work to take the returnee, the survivor, back to their original jobs and explain that with their reference and with the reference of the government and signed documents, convince their prior employer that this was something outside of their control and would they please take them back. And they're seeing a good number of them being able to return to their previous jobs. If that's not the case and there's not that support, then what you're finding is a young man that is left desperate, and there is no help on one side, and there is a scam opportunity on the other. And sadly, even today, I received notice from somebody that we returned a year ago that said to me, I think I'm going back. And he had a friend that said to him, don't do this, don't consider it, please don't go back. And he said, I can't.
He's going back to
scamming.
Tell me about that. Oh, how does it? I mean, a person working 18 hours a day, being tortured, having no freedom, and wanting to go back to that life.
Yeah, it's hard for me to, put yourself in someone's shoes. It's hard for you unless you walk a mile. How do I understand? It's one of the reasons why I needed to come here. I needed to not just experience them through their words, where we receive them in our country, but I needed to go back to their home country and try to understand. And so, yeah, talking back through, we learned recently that the average wage is about $50 a month for regional people living in the villages. We heard that a monthly wage from a coffee shop here in Addis is less than the rent for one square room that they can live in. So you have to take 2 jobs just to survive. Some people's stories are that they go to a scam center, and some scam centers are what they would call white scam centers. There's not abuse. Some are black. I would probably contest that most people coming from a black scam center would never, ever go back there again. But those that came from white, their experiences might be vastly different. Their jobs, I mean, in some of the scams in KK Park before they destroyed it, they had a Starbucks. It was fake, but it gave an idea of like, you could go to McDonald's, you could go to Starbucks, there was cafes, coffee shops, there were KTVs, which are they're like a slash between a karaoke bar and a brothel. And so they provided these realistic, endeavors that you could do in your off time, which made you feel almost like you're in a real world, even though just outside of that, there's 10-foot walls that you can't get out of and you can't escape from. But they don't see that because the survival makes them tunnel vision. Maybe their experience wasn't that bad. And so if you can go, and if you're promised $3,000, which was just a lie, but you could actually take home 1,000, and you just got to be slapped around a little bit, locked up every now and again. But of course, if you actually make your target, they pretty much leave you alone. If you agree to work, you show up to work, you don't fall asleep, you do all the things you're supposed to do, you get left alone. You can just continue to work. If you're good at your job, you take home $800 a month, $1,000 a month. Again, I can't judge until I walk in their shoes. But if you're sitting at home and your maximum you're going to earn is $50 a month, and you can go back to a scam center and you can earn $800 to $1,000 a month, which do you choose? And the complex nature of this is that some jobs in the scam center don't have anything much, like you don't see the other side of it. Some of their jobs is what we call finders, which means you just scour social media, Facebook, Instagram, any social media content. You're just looking for phone numbers. That's all you're doing. Once you collect 50 phone numbers in a day, you hand those phone numbers over to Chatter. That's it. That's your job. Mm-hmm. You don't see the end. You don't see the person losing their life savings. You don't see the person taking their life at the end because they've got nothing left. Mm-hmm. You just collect 50 phone numbers a day. And at the end of that month, you get your pay packet and you can send that home to your family. You can convince yourself that that's okay. You can convince yourself that you're not really doing harm. Mm. But if you open your eyes and you take in, you are part of a mechanism, a machine that is destroying lives, that is completely illegal, that is, it's a crime.
Yeah.
Are you a young man that can accept a criminal lifestyle for $1, or are you a man that can't? And I think that's the predicament of character. That's the moral question that every young man now faces, young man and woman, because of course we have returned both back. I think it's important to say that the statistics usually about 85% men and then 20 to 15% women. They're all sitting there with this predicament, the moral question. Can I give away my morality? Can I give away my humanity to accept $1? Mm-hmm. Or do I say no and live in poverty?
All right. Which country do you operate from?
Myself, I am in Thailand.
All right.
But the scam centers are not found in Thailand. They're in Myanmar. But where we live is right on the very border of Thailand and Myanmar. Thais joke about it saying, it's not Thailand, because it's this no man's land in the middle of nowhere. So yeah, I live on the border of Thailand and Myanmar, which is the major area of.
Aren't you scared?
That there is, yeah. I mean, there's a genuine. I think scared is not the word, but yet I think to not be naive means you have to be cautious. But this has taken a different shape over the last few years. And so if I take you back to the very beginning, I mean, our operations were at night, secretive, interactions, hiding. I mean, nobody knew what we were doing. It was stealthy, right? Because we were completely fearful. I mean, this is transnational organized crime. This is the biggest mafia in the world. And you're starting to interrupt. However, our main job was to rescue and receive, to recover those who are cast out of the scam centers, either because they paid a ransom and finally they can get out, or because they worked and they were released, or because they were sick, or whatever reason the scam centers send them out. We were almost cleaning the streets for the companies because we were getting people home, and the more we got them home, the less it was notable that there's thousands of people walking around the streets that shouldn't be there. So in a way, I think we assisted, I don't want to say like assisted scam center, but in a way, like by us helping the victim clean up the streets, we weren't hurting the bottom line of the industry, because my goal was support of victims of human trafficking. It was not a takedown. And even now, I don't focus on the prosecution. I don't focus on the takedown. You asked me earlier before the interview, more of a prosecutorial side, or what's law enforcement doing? And I answered to you, my goal is laser focused to the victim of human trafficking. That's someone else's job. And so I think that's the other side of it, is I didn't come at it from an angle of trying to take out these industries. I supported victims of trafficking and people. I was there for the humanity. Since then, because of being one of the very few groups and the very few NGOs working in the region on the issue, because everyone was so scared they left, or they weren't willing to answer the phone, or they weren't willing to help because they're like, we can't come down there. We would be unsafe. We can't send our NGO workers here. There were so few, right? But because of that, the central government of Thailand saw what we did, and we were so successful in supporting the humans, the victims home. They came to us, our group, just the other year, and really were tasked by the Ministry of Defence of Thailand, by the National Security Council, by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. that of course gives you a different playing field because we're working with the government. We are protected by the military. We don't need to operate in secret and darkness anymore. We can support the victims in a very different way. And I think what happened, I mean, during that transition, we actually had people from a special forces unit of the US come to our work, and they were looking for vulnerabilities. And we were vulnerable. I mean, we were not doing a good job. None of us are trained in this kind of thing. And so they came and, excuse me, he came to look at the vulnerabilities of our team, and he said, you guys are in trouble. Like, he said, the only way forward now is that you become almost as infamous as possible. Get on every TV program, make every news report. Every time you see a government minister or an embassy official or an ambassador, take a photo with them, publish it. Make sure you are so known that if you went missing, it would cause an issue. And so I guess in some ways that's a tactic that we took. And for a while there, we of course became a spokespersons for the issue, which meant that hopefully we were somewhat safeguarded and we could somewhat live in peace. But during the years, I mean, there was time where my young family, my wife, my children, I sent them away to hide because I wasn't sure what was going to come, and there was times where we left town because we were worried about our security. It's a genuine risk.
Do you think this is something that we have to worry about going forward? I mean, in my mind, I was equating the whole thing with drug. And maybe it is bigger than that now. Should we be really concerned?
This industry, this transnational organized crime for forced criminality, these scam centers, has now become more profitable than any illegal trade in the world. It is now bigger than drugs. It is now bigger than arms. It's now bigger than sex trade. It's the biggest industry in the world. Yes, we should all be concerned.
I mean, if it is that profitable, the people that will be involved in this will be powerful people as well. We're not going to expect only these gangsters or individuals coming from some part of the world or some country and be a boss in one place. We're going to expect individuals from the government itself to be involved. So how can we protect ourselves? How can countries protect their boundaries and their people if it is going at that pace?
Yeah, I'm always careful about how I want to answer these questions because I don't want to be too critical of government without, evidence. But I will say this. The scam centers use the vulnerability of mankind in order to both scam from the West and bring in the victims of human trafficking. These same industries use the vulnerabilities of governments and the corruption that is within in order to be able to do what they do. The more corrupt governments are, or the more unstable they are, that is the area in which they operate. And so how did Myanmar become such a huge hub? It is 70 years of civil war. There is no clear, relation between the central government and the region in which these scam centers are being run. They're run in militia military zones that are in opposition with the government. And so because of that destabilized area, that's where they focused on. So they look for vulnerabilities. If there is a vulnerability in the government due to corruption, they will find it. There is so much money. You got to talk about like bringing in tens of thousands of people into a country and then transiting them and moving them and across borders with no stamps or no passports or no identification. There are always people that their job was to watch out. But there is millions of dollars on offer to look away. And that is the thing that we need to be concerned about, is how do we tighten so that the right people are standing guard and protecting our borders, and we don't have people standing there that are willing to look the other way. Because it's not always that they need them to be complicit in doing a job. Sometimes they just need them not doing their job.
Omission is there, yeah.
Yeah.
Am I naive in assuming that especially in the countryside of Ethiopia or most of Africa, the type of English that they're looking for is not there? So we may not be their targets.
You are naive like the rest of the world. They don't need perfect English any longer. They have scripts that have been designed. All you have to do is copy and paste. Most can be trained to copy and paste very well. The rest of it is AI technology. Of course, you get stuck on a question, you throw it into ChatGPT, and you have an answer in 0.01 seconds later. So if you get asked a question about the US that you don't know about, or a word that you don't know about, you throw it into ChatGPT, you have the answer right in front of you. So we don't need to have the highly educated anymore. That's the issue. Originally, the focus was that. It broadened, and now it's like anyone's welcome. As long as you can use a mouse and a keyboard, and even then, we could probably train you. They could train you. They don't need you to be well on English anymore because it's all there for you.
Wow. What are we looking forward to achieving and trying to tackle all this?
We're looking at this from a multifaceted area. This is a huge issue that goes across many, many sectors. This cannot be a one-way answer. We have to look at it and tackle it from all areas. It would require sectors of foreign affairs from every country, internal affairs, Interpol, policing, NGOs, community workers, all banding together to both prevent why people are leaving, in the rescues, how to rescue them and bring them home, and then how to repatriate them and build them again, that they don't choose to go out because of the same push reasons that they went out in the first place. And then you've also got to have the part of law enforcement that investigates, that collects enough evidence so that the recruiters that are sending these people or organizing these people to go are found and prosecuted. It's one of the things that I think we're missing globally is the the very strong prosecution of people involved in this. And I'm not talking about the prosecution of victims of trafficking. I think they need to be protected under UN laws, under,
Local
laws, yeah. But for example, there are agents in the Middle East which use Ethiopia as a catchment, throw out their net, bring in a whole lot of new workers and ship them off to the scam centers while collecting commission for every single person they bring in. That needs to be targeted and prosecuted. But the only way to do that is hearing from the victim that returns, who was it that orchestrated their departure? Because nobody's at the airport to receive them, that information is lost. And so unless we all lift the scale in which we're operating and actually realizing that this is a major issue, where until we decide not to be naive, but actually learn what is happening and understanding that this is a crisis that is at an epidemic level, we're not going to see the advancement in the closing of these scam centers that we need to see. We're not going to see a promising outcome at the end. What we're going to see is that they continue to take over every inch of this world. And the scary thing is they're not always popping up in the center of cities. They're popping up in the regional areas. And you asked me before, what about in the regional areas? They're not the target audience, but those areas can be the target of where they want to set up the next scam center.
Amazing. You mentioned technology, the use of technology and facilitation of their works using AI, and what is actually becoming prominent today. That gives me a hope because, one, if they're adapting to technology, they may not need the humans to come and operate that, because AI will do I know the crime is there, everything is there, but it will not be involving people. One is that, and the other thing is, are there really powerful people involved in there? Like, I wanted to ask, because this kind of things does not happen in vacuum, because you need to have generals, you need to have really big people to flourish in this industry. did you have any happenstance or any kind of interaction or any kind of circumstance where you made or where you heard of really powerful people involving? Because if it is operated by this kind of people, I don't see an end to it.
Yeah. I mean, to use Myanmar as an example, the key players, like the major generals, like you say, they're known. And many of the countries have issued red notices. Many of the countries have made sanctions against them. And so they kind of, from a political point of view, do what they need to do. So yes, of course there is, like you said, there has to be powerful people that are in this. This is the only way that it works, right? Most powerful people are very well protected. So the question is, do you solve this issue by cutting off the head, or do you solve this issue further down the track? I'm not the one to answer that question because it is so outside of my scope of expertise. It's so outside of, my focal point, my goal. What I will say is that there is those who are focused on the anti-human trafficking side, which is your first question, which said, now that there's AI, we need less people. There will always be a need for the human interaction because machines cannot replace the human self. And when the majority of these scams are reliant on a relationship that is built to get somebody to give over their life savings, it is not a machine, and it is not a well-calculated decision. It is an emotional response to a relationship that is built that gets people to lose their life savings. There will always have to be the human part of that. So AI can do many things, but you still have to have a human self. The issue is, what we're finding is that there is those who are trafficked in against their will, but as the industry continues down the track, trained people become complicit. Outside people that do not have the same moral compass, do not have the same character, do not think that this is something that they couldn't do. Their willingness to go in and scam is there. So we're getting less people in there that are victims of trafficking and more that are complicit, more that are willing scammers. We call them career scammers. So if I look at 2022, I would say that the rates were probably 90% victims of trafficking and 10% career scammers. The career scammers were the bosses that were originally there, right? Management level, whatever. Over time, that's changed. Some of those scammers, those victims of trafficking, they changed. They decided to become complicit. They decided to become okay. Others hear about it and apply for the job and they move in. And so over the years, we've seen those who were traffic victims out and those who wanted to stay remain. And that's where, when we hear shutdowns or crackdowns on scam centers and you think, we know there's 20,000 in the scam center, why did only 5,000 go out? It is troubling to understand that there are many there that when they get asked on that day, would you like to go? They say, no, thank you, I will stay. And they can. And so you've got these career scammers move in that are complicit and happy to work, so they still supply the human aspect. But then we also have to look at the financial fraud crime of this. And so much efforts and investigations are on the financial crimes. This is cyber crimes, this is money laundering, this is financial fraud. And so that is the two ways in which we combat what's happening globally, is those that are focused on stopping the human trafficking. However, we are being outnumbered by those who don't want to be rescued. And then you've got the cyber crime, which the investigation of that, yet that part is so complex because it is far more advanced than what we realize on the outside world in comparative to what's happening inside the scam centers. And the scam centers use cryptocurrency. That can all be taken offline. That can all be put on a little wallet, a little thumb drive, and kept there. And this is the scary part. The only way to really understand the financial fraud part is to track the money. When the money hits the crypto wallets, it disappears. People say that it's not regulated. It is very regulated. The thing is, everybody has a personal code. Everybody has a personal QR code that is distinct to you and your wallet. So it is traceable. We can trace it. We can track it. We can regulate it. We have no governance over it in any of our countries. So it disappears into the cyber world. We have to wait for it to reappear. Wherever it reappears, they're the bosses. The money's not reappearing. It's happened a few times. It happened in Singapore, and Singapore came down and prosecuted those who withdrew millions of dollars. Now, what's been said was that this whole scamming originated in Singapore. They were the grandfathers. They were the ones that thought up this idea. I don't know, maybe around their coffee table. They passed it to Taiwan, who developed the technology, because Taiwan's leading the world in technologies, who then passed it to China, and they did what China does, which puts it on steroids, and it exploded.
We're not talking about the countries. We're talking about criminals in the country.
Criminal syndicates within the country.
Yeah.
Yep. And so then they have gone out and they've exploded what maybe was the grandfather's plan, more small scale, and they made it into this exponential, like, huge thing. Well, the idea was that they paid back their grandparents, and that was the money that surfaced. They took it out and they paid them back. Thank you for giving us what you did. That then led to prosecution. The rest of the money has disappeared. Well, when talking to one of the scam bosses, the mob bosses of like the Shizhangs that went to jail, what they said was, none of this money, we're pouring billions of dollars into this. None of this money comes from the scam. It's money that we have generated previously. The money that is coming into the scam industry, we are saving it for 100 years from now to spend. It is part of their global domination, part of their plan of colonization of the world, right? So where we're sitting there going, wait for the money to appear, then we know who's the boss. They don't have any plan to take it out of their crypto banks for another 100 years.
Wow. Okay. I was thinking about the general public when you talked about the whole issue. People like myself, I am in the media. We know a lot about things. I mean, we receive information and we consume a lot of content. But I know maybe very little about this thing. So I want the general public to understand what is happening with regard to this issue. So what are the three most important things that the layman, just an ordinary person, should know about this?
Let me answer that in two parts. So the first part is, I was talking to somebody, a guy yesterday, Ethiopian brother, and he heard about what I did. And he said, oh, I heard about that. You've returned 300 people. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. He's like, the news has reported on it. He showed me the news article. That was back from like the original rescue that we made. The very first, there was 260 that came out, and of them 138 were Ethiopian. Those 138 we sent home in batches. That first batch was press release. They made the cover of whatever newspaper or news agency, and they spoke about the issue. Then they reported on a few other of the cases that came through. And from then, it's been kind of silent. And I said to him, no, brother, I've returned over 2,000 people in the last year to Ethiopia alone, over 6,000 to other African nations and some Asian nations abroad. In the last year, 6,000 people with our team. He was like, I had no idea. I thought it stopped at that 300. So it is the responsibility of, like you say, journalism, news, government, to put it out there. Because if it's not, nobody knows. So the question is, what do you put out there? How do you stop it? Well, number one, I would say most jobs in Asia, Southeast Asia, are not genuine. They are illegitimate, illegal jobs. Now, this is where it becomes complicated, because the scam center, I can't say there is no jobs, there is jobs. It's called a scam center. And if you're a willing person to become a criminal in your life, you might choose to take that job. But if you're sitting here in Ethiopia and you do not want to be a criminal for your life, then there is no jobs in Southeast Asia for you. Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, Malaysia. If you are taking jobs there, you are likely going to be sold into a scam center and become a slave. Two, if you are being promised a high-paying, rewarding job, it is not real. It is manufactured. And thirdly, if you're not getting the visas and the proper reports that you need before you leave, don't get on the plane. They have it set up that they'll convince you, when you get here, we'll get you the visa. No, before I get there, get me the visa. The one thing that makes Ethiopia such a vulnerable state is that they can come to Thailand, a transit country. We have visa on arrival. You don't need to apply. So they convince you, just come and we'll get it when you're in country. If they are a genuine business, they can get it for you before you arrive. So test them, test the waters. If you don't have the visas, if you don't have the paperwork, don't get on the flight in the first place. Again, if you're being offered high-paying salary jobs in that part of Asia as an African person, as an Ethiopian person, it is likely not going to be real. And there is no jobs in that region that are readily available now.
Amazing. Okay. This is going to be a closing question, but I think it's really important for you to give me this. What is next for your organization?
That's a good question. We are still focused because there are still people inside. And so we need to remain laser focused. What happens often is you can get caught up in this whirlpool of people pulling at you, governments wanting to talk to you, attend meetings. Every day that we're not on the border is a day where we've got people that aren't being responded to. For example, I get a call this morning. There are 16 Ethiopians going to be moved from Myanmar into Thailand. Can you be there for them? No, I'm in Ethiopia. There is nobody else on the ground. Our team is in Ethiopia. There's 4 of us on our team. Our team is in Ethiopia. We're not there to help these 16 about to cross. Now, I can meet them in a week when they're in immigration detention center. So I can still be there, but if we're away, we're not there. So I think for us, our focus is always going to be on the individual and the victim. What we are trying to do now is set up in these home countries, why we went to Kenya, Uganda, and Ethiopia. Who is it in these countries that are willing to put their hand up and say, I'll help? We spoke about it earlier, and everyone that I've spoken to since being here, it is the same message. Most of the young men and women we return aren't saying, I wish you gave me money. Most of the young women that return said, I wish that there was someone I could pick up a phone and call. I wish that there was someone that could hear my story. That is the healing process that they've not been through. So they are not moving past their trauma. They are not moving from victim to survivor, which means it's very hard for them to integrate back into society. We need people that hear this issue and say, I'll drive to the airport. Tonight, we had 20 people arrive from scam centers in Myanmar to Ethiopia. There will be nobody at the airport meeting them. Tomorrow, we have another 23. There will be nobody at the airport meeting them. We return people home continuously. If there were people that put their hand up and say, I'll be there at the airport to drive them to their house, to have a coffee with them, to answer a phone call, because they can't think about the shame. They cannot explain to their families what happened. I mean, you're Ethiopian. I mean, I'm not, but I've heard it from them. I can't tell my families about these crimes. I can't tell my families I've lost everything. I can't explain this to them. My parents would kill themselves if they knew. I don't know what that's like, but I've heard it enough times for it to be genuine. So is there someone outside of that inner family circle that could listen to them? We need government members that are willing to hear. You are losing, the Ethiopian country is losing evidence every day that people return and not being asked what happened. We talked about capturing and prosecuting the recruiters. Many of them want to tell who it was that sold them. Yet when they go to the police stations, the police go, what report you want to make? No, go away. We don't even know what you're talking about. Because like you said, nobody knows. So they come back and they go to their village out in Awassa to the police station and say, I want to report the guy who recruited me to human trafficking across the globe. And the police officer says, what? Is this a joke? And really the only person they should be reporting it to is the Ministry of Interior. But how do they know how to access it? Where do they know where to go? And so our main focus now is, can we take the information of people that are returning home and share it with people, whether it's law enforcement, government, or civilians, that will put their hand up and say, I'll at least receive them at the airport. I'll at least welcome them to their home country. Many of them keep this kind of offense because Ethiopia never came to rescue them. You've got guys that sit in IDC for months after they've been rescued. They go from one traumatic experience to the next, and then they sit in months, and their responsibility is for them to pay themselves to get home. I'm not going to argue that part, right? I'm not going to ask some other person to pay for them for them getting in the position that they're in, right? They've got themselves there, and now they need to find ways to pay for themselves to go home. They do that. But then they get home and there's kind of this offense that's built up because I was forgotten, I was left, I was lost. But sometimes if someone just comes and said, welcome home, welcome back to your home, welcome back, and gives them that, they automatically feel this embrace of the nation, which they don't have. And because they don't have, it's a continuation of that victimization of a person. So our goal now is, how do we connect better with government, CSOs, civilians, law enforcement in home countries, that we're not meeting people, putting on the plane and saying, see you later, I hope you have a good life. But we're saying, here is a pamphlet with a list of phone numbers for you to call. Someone named Getachew is going to be at the airport, and he'll have a sign, he'll be there, he's going to drive you home. He's going to take you for dinner first. And he's going to, you're going to eat food, Ethiopian food. You're going to be able to have your injera, and then he's going to take you home. I think that is the beginning stage of healing that we're going to see, I really think, stamp out the effective nature of the scamming industry in your hometown. Because what I've realized with Ethiopians is that they are inherently good people. They want to do good things, that have good morals. And they're not easily persuaded to this criminal side. In fact, and I can say this, Ethiopians get treated worse than every other people group in the scam centers. Every other African nation, every other Asian nation.
Because they are defined, maybe?
Yeah. They stand up together and say, I'm not willing to do this. And they get beaten for it. They get tortured for it. And eventually they break, and some of them do it because you survive, right? But they are the last group willing to give up their morality, give up their conscience. And so they find themselves to be the most abused in the scam centers, the most hurt, the most forgotten in a way. When we have rescues, and the 260 that I talked to you about, every other country came to get their people, and 138 Ethiopians sat there. And they were the last ones to get support, and it was our team and the team that I work with that stood up and said, we'll send the 138 home. And we did, because we don't want them to be the forgotten ones. And I think that there's something in that needs to be a part of the healing journey for them.
Oh, Judah, I want to talk about this thing maybe for 2 or 3 additional hours, but I know that you're leaving today.
Yeah.
But I thank you so much for coming and sharing all these important things.
You're welcome, and thank you. As soon as I heard that this opportunity was available, I said yes without even knowing the time or the date, because what I've learned while being here is the issue is not talked about enough.
Absolutely.
It is not reaching the homes. It's not reaching the young men and women on the streets that are walking around, that are hanging out, that are in coffee shops. This needs to be something that is spread, on social media. And so I'm so grateful to be on a podcast, because I think that it's the number one, journalistic way of reaching a mass audience. And so I had to say yes straight away, because it needs to be in the ears of those people of this generation. And hopefully through this, we'll have many that say no to going. and many that return that now have support because of it.
I hope the next time we meet, it'll be to talk about it and consider it like history.
Yeah, that'd be
We
great.
hope. Yeah. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you
All
very
right.
much.